The Montreal Canadiens are off to their worst start in 26 years at 0-4. Gee, I wonder what we're going to talk about on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie, and welcome to another edition of Hockey Inside Out. This week's guests, Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, Rick Green, Stanley Cup champion. You know his entire resume, and I'm sure you know the resume, of course, of the legendary Michael Farber, who is this week's special guest on Hockey Inside Out. Thanks so much for hanging out with us this week.
My pleasure, Julian.
Let's get into it with the Montreal Canadiens and their 0-4-0 start. Their loss against the San Jose Sharks on Tuesday, pretty bad. When was the last time we saw them play that badly? Oh, yeah, that's right. Against the Buffalo Sabres, where they lost almost as badly. What the heck is going on with the Montreal Canadiens? Why do they look so bad?
Well, against San Jose, you can only sum that up in one word: refund. It was a complete lack of attention and energy by Montreal, and we've seen it now twice, as you mentioned, Julian, the Buffalo game. Very poor performances, and it goes right down, starting in goal, where two poor performances, defensive zone coverage, the special teams obviously have been very poor, and they're not generating anything really 5-on-5. There has been one not moral victory, but morale victory, and that's to see Drouin score twice and smile. So that's good. But other than that, I see nothing good about the start of the season.
Mike mentions the word refund for Jeff Molson. There's not a lot of people to refund tickets. That was quite a sight. That was a half-empty Bell Center, it looked like, against the Sharks. They announced 16,000 attendance. That's, I guess, the tickets sold. There weren't that many people in the building. I know driving to the game, leaving my house on the South Shore, I was a little later leaving than usual, and there was no traffic around the Bell Center before the game. And I thought, boy, that's weird. And I managed to get parked pretty easy. And then when the game started, I saw why there was no traffic, because there was hardly any people. The good news for the fans is that there was absolutely no traffic, I'm sure, by the time they left the game. Easy route to get home. That's what the only good thing about the game for the fans. But, I think there's just been so much turnover with this team. And, how many teams can lose their number one goalie, their number one defenseman, their number one center, throw Joel Edmondson in there? This isn't shocking that they're off to a bad start. It's shocking how bad it is that they've scored 3 goals in 4 games. I think it was Michael on Twitter who compared them after the third game to the old gag line with the Rangers, the goal a game line. Canadians aren't even that now. They can't even score a goal a game, 3 goals in 4 games. So, the turnover is just, the roster took a big hit. And, they got the biggest concern right now for Jeff Molson, even more so than being 0-4, is the empty seats. That could be something that gets even worse moving forward.
Like Stu says, I agree. They're missing some key pieces, obviously, with Price, Weber, Edmondson. You take those guys out of your lineup, and those are tough players to replace. But, if you look at their overall game, man, oh man, they surely are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm concerned about their, lack of intensity. I'm looking at there has no cohesion in their play. Their transition game is terrible, and they can't make a pass from point A to point B without being behind somebody or just not being able to generate anything. And I'm looking at their defensive zone play where they're running around. They seem to be confused as far as who's supposed to be going where. And when things are going bad, it's been there before. It's tough to identify all the problem areas and try and fix it in a short term. But listen, they've got new guys. It's going to take a little time for them to get together. Hopefully, they're going to figure it out really soon, because they can't continue to struggle in all areas. Michael had touched on their special teams. I mean, this is your key ingredients to any success of any team in the NHL, and you can't continue to go on the way they're executing and figure they're going to win hockey games. So they've got a lot of problem areas ahead of themselves, and they better get it figured out really soon, because the clock is ticking as far as the way that they're playing so poorly right now.
And the Canadiens are a $1.5 billion business, and right now they're relying heavily on a 21-year-old in Nick Suzuki and a 20-year-old in Cole Caulfield. And Corey Perry's not there. Shea Weber's not there. They've lost a lot of leaders, and it looks like the pressure is really on these young guys. I mean, how many times has Cole Caulfield fanned on a shot already in the first few games? He looks like he's maybe a mix of nervous or scared or just a lack of confidence. But that's a concern also, that the young guys that this team is counting on moving forward have really not looked good. They've looked, you look at how they played in the playoffs last year, and you look at them now, and it's like totally different players.
Well, Deneau insulated some of those guys, the first line. And so the matchups were a little bit easier for Suzuki and Caulfield. Now they're not. And it's a bright, shiny contract for Suzuki, but he has got to be a first line center at some point. And I'm not sure he's comfortable in that role yet.
And also, they've lost 2/3 of their first line. Thomas Tatar's in New Jersey now, Philip Deneau in LA. And that was their best line for the last couple of years, especially 5-on-5. That was a really effective line. So they've lost 2/3 of that line. And as I mentioned earlier, lost their goalie, lost their captain, lost Corey Perry. This is not the same team that went to the Stanley Cup final last year, not even close.
And it reminds me a little bit of the funk that they got into last year, where they showed no emotion and no real desperation in their play. And it just looks like they're accepting what's going on. Nobody seems to be upset. Other than Gallagher, and nobody seems to want to grab a hold of this bad situation and try and get it corrected by saying, "Hey, listen, we're in a bad place right now. I'm pretty pissed off. I better get something going here so we can get out of this, because we can't let it go like this." And they, like I said before, they got some problems, and some of these guys are going to have to step up and make the difference, because it's going to be a tough grind, and their schedule doesn't get easier.
Now, Rick, one guy who was pissed off was Jeff Petrie in the post-game news conference. I've never seen Jeff Petrie's always a calm, cool, collected guy, thoughtful with his answers. He was angry. I mean, he was really angry. He was at a loss for words, saying how there was no compete level. And out of the 4 games they've played, 2 of them, they've had no compete level, half of their games. So that is a big concern.
Absolutely. One guy who I thought would have made at least some sort of a difference for the Montreal Canadiens is Mike Hoffman, who they signed in the offseason, and a guy who was looked at to provide some offense, some scoring, especially on the power play. He had a few shots on net, but of course, just like his teammates against San Jose, no goals. What were your first impressions of Mike Hoffman?
Well, I wrote in a column this week. I was watching him last week at while he was on the ice. One of the member of the training staff still recovering from his lower body injury, and he skated in on the shooter-tutor goalie and fired one top corner, picked up another puck, fired one top corner. He did about 10 times in a row. Every shot, top corner, top corner. It's a shooter-tutor goalie, but that's the shot that makes Hoffman his money. He's a pure goal scorer. We saw he had one-timer last night that he got off on that power play. It was a really good shot, but he missed all the training camp. He's with a new team. He's with new line mates and new power plays, so it's going to take time. I mean, the shot is there. We saw it, as I said, on that one-timer, but it's not an easy situation for him to step into with no training camp at all, and then thrown into a team that's already 0-3. Things aren't going well. But Mike, he is who he is. I mean, that shot, and it should help them on the power play moving forward, and it better help them on the power play moving forward, since they're 0-13 on the power play.
Yeah, you have to cut him a little bit of slack. First game back, he's been out, like Stu says, for a while. You can practice all you want, and that's fine to get yourself kind of in shape, but he has to get in game shape and get find his groove, and he's going to take a little while to get into the type of condition that we hope to see from him. He's skated really well. I like him as far as obviously his shot and his ability to make plays, and he's also going to have to there's going to be an experiment, I think, here to see who's he going to play with, and that's going to help his game along and probably complement his style of play, depending on who he's going to play with. But he's got a little bit of time to get his A game out there, but he has the potential to make things happen, obviously, on the power play and his ability to skate.
He's a one-trick pony, essentially, and that's scoring goals. And that's the best trick to have, because goals are the currency of the game.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you can score, that's a good thing, especially for this team, which seems offensively challenged. I would like to ask Rick this, that power play shot, good shot on net. He seemed to me to be perhaps 3 feet, or at least a good stride from where he should have been shooting that puck. He seemed deeper than the circle. And was there an issue with positioning there, or should he have taken a stride and gotten closer?
Well, those power play guys are a special breed, and they have to take what's given to them. And depending on who they're up against, a lot of times, obviously, they're aware of the guys that can really do some damage on their power play, so they'll try and eliminate those guys the best way they can. But one thing about them, and Hoffman is a classic example, his past has proven that he, no matter what, is able to find ways to get shots through, and he will. And he'll make the adjustments necessarily, whether it's 3 feet one way or the other. He's going to find that lane, and he's going to be able to rip a few shots and should be effective, in the future.
Yeah, Mike, that's a great point, but I wonder how much of that is the Habs power play setup, because so much of it seems to be relying on shots from far out. I go back to that 5-on-3 power play they had one of the early games and had one shot, and it seemed to be getting the puck back to Jeff Petrie at the point, which goes back to when Shea Weber was here, and the whole power play seemed to be focused on getting the puck back to Shea Weber for the big blast. I mean, NHL goalies are going to stop those unless there's somebody in front of the net screening or deflecting, and the Canes don't have enough guys there either. And as you said, Mike, goals are the thing. Wasn't there a GM who once said about Brett Hull, all he can do is score goals?
One thing that did concern me about Hoffman was he took a penalty. And this team, the way it's killing penalties, can't afford to take any penalties. They're not generating calls because they're not controlling the puck. They're not forcing the play. So there's an imbalance there. And until the penalty kill gets better, anytime you step into the box, you are putting your team into dire jeopardy.
And you mentioned, Michael, earlier them missing Philip Danault. Well, who was their best penalty killer? Philip Danault. And, I know when he left and fans were just looking at the goals he scored last year and just basing his game on the stats and saying, they don't need him, they won't miss him. At the time, I was rolling my eyes. Like, Philip Danault was a heck of a hockey player. I think it was Ray Ferraro listening on TSN, who I think is best hockey analyst out there. And he said, if Austin Matthews is paid $10.5 million to score goals, how much should the guy be paid who stops him from scoring goals? And, Phil Danault did that in the playoffs last year. And I think this team is really missing Philip Danault now. And I think they're going to miss him even more as the season goes on for many reasons.
And if I can add from a defensive standpoint, I'm looking at their defense when it comes to challenging the shooters. They're going in such a way that they're really not in the shooting lane, and they're allowing the opposition to come in and tee it up from the top of the circle, hoping that they're going to block it. But that doesn't work, anymore at this level. You have to challenge the way the guys shoot the puck. You have to aggressively challenge anything from the top of the circles to force them to, make a quick shot or, throw them off from what they would really like to do. And I don't see that happening with the defense. They're not in that shooting lane, and they're not aggressive enough on those shooters that are coming in and teeing it up and, picking apart Jake Allen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've noticed that a lot of goals that the Canadiens have allowed to this point, it's either some shot from the point that's redirected, traffic in front. Like, I don't think the Canadiens are doing that good of a job with that 5-on-5 or on the penalty kill in that facet. So I'm really glad you brought that up. We now move our attention to Thursday's game. The Montreal Canadiens will host the Carolina Hurricanes, and one Jesperi Kotkaniemi will be returning for the first time since he signed that offer sheet. He was tendered to by the Carolina Hurricanes. The prodigal son returns to Montreal. I'm kidding. He's not the prodigal son. What do you think will be the reception for Jesperi Kotkaniemi when he plays on Thursday with the Carolina Hurricanes?
For me, I'm sure that he's going to get his share of boos, but KK it was looking after his best interests and not the fans' interests. And there's a situation where it was a no-brainer for him to make the move. He didn't digest very well that he got sat out of the playoffs and didn't get a chance to play. And he thought his future probably would have been, limited a little bit in his development. So he decided to jump ship, got a nice pay raise, and he's going into an environment with a really good team. And, he speaks very highly of the group, and he's going to get a chance to play and develop there. And, I'm happy for the kid. He was a really nice young man. I don't think anybody had anything bad to say about him. So he just made a move that was best for him. And I wish him the best of luck, except for tomorrow night.
Booing is reflexive. This is what fans do. They are conditioned to boo when a player, whether he wants to be here or not wants to be here, when he returns, in almost every case, he's going to get booed. PK Subban, who's done so much for the city of Montreal, gets booed, which is remarkable when he's gone from the most popular player to public enemy. So this is what fans will do. But I agree with Rick. If someone throws $6.1 million at me, yeah, I'm going to sign, especially when you started the season as a scratch, you ended the season, the playoffs as a scratch. He didn't see the future here. The issue with Kotkaniemi is an issue of how he was managed by his coaches and by the general manager. They should look at how he was developed or not developed here and how players feel about it.
You know, Jesperi Kotkaniemi was handed, he was handed the winning 649 lotto ticket by the Carolina Hurricanes. Here's
only $6.1 million. You figured it'd be a bigger output.
49 lottery ticket. What are you going to do? Say no? I don't want that. I mean, the kid, it was a great. You know, there was revenge involved with Carolina getting back for the Sebastian Aho offer, but it wasn't all revenge. They obviously like this young player. They think highly of him. You're getting a kid 20 years old, 3 years in the NHL already. And they think he's going to help their team moving forward. And, you know, somewhere in the desk drawer of the Hurricanes GM is the contract extension waiting to be signed, which will be less than $6 million a year. I'm sure they can't offer him that until January. But as Michael said, I mean, if the Montreal fans are going to boo PK Subban on his return, after everything he did for hockey, the Children's Hospital, everything else, they're going to boo anybody. So I want to boo the fans who are going to boo Kotkaniemi on Thursday night because the kid did absolutely nothing wrong. You know, he was obviously upset that he was a healthy scratch for the last two games of the Stanley Cup final. He didn't think he was being developed properly here. And Carolina offered him a winning 649 ticket, a chance to go to a different environment, play for a different coach and Rod Brindamore, who I think will be really good for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And during a Zoom conference the other day, when I asked Kotkaniemi how he likes life in Carolina, he said the sun shines every day and there's lots of golf courses. So I said, are you a good golfer? And he says, I'm working on it. So he's going to have a lot of time to work on his golf game in Carolina. So I'm happy for the kid. I really liked Kotkaniemi when he was here. I have a son about the same age as him. I was so impressed with the maturity that Kotkaniemi handled everything that came with playing in Montreal at such a young age in a new country, a language he was still getting comfortable with, a smaller rink than he was used to playing on. I think Kotkaniemi, you know, there's reasons why Carolina wanted him, and it wasn't all revenge. And when the fans do boo him, which they certainly will Thursday night, I know how Kotkaniemi is going to respond. You'll have that big smile again on his face.
A big smile, and if he scores, it'll be pretty wide. Might even flash the 4 like what he did in the playoffs. Speaking of 4, the fourth and final question on the Hockey Inside Out. The fact that the Canadiens are 0-4, do you think the fatigue and the short off season that they had because of their long Cup final run is actually playing a role in why they've looked as bad as they have?
I think it has. I think that's human nature. It's great to play for the Stanley Cup, especially if you win it, because then you get to have the Stanley Cup in your backyard. You get to swim around half naked in public pools. You can do pretty much whatever you want. If you lose the Stanley Cup, you've played as many hockey games, but you have nothing to show for it. I mean, some cities, maybe you get a banner the next year. Hey, we made it to the Stanley Cup final. You don't get that in Montreal. So you add in the turnover and you look at the start. Yeah, it's been tough to rev the motors, especially as Rick and Stu point out with the huge turnover here. So as a victory lap, the first 4 games of the season have been very unconvincing.
We also learned this summer that you can eat poutine out of the Stanley Cup. Which,
yes, you can.
Yes,
like shrimp poutine. I think that's what Mathieu Joseph did. Yeah,
Yes,
you can
it
eat a
was.
lot of really interesting things in that bowl.
The Cup spent a lot of time around the Montreal area actually this summer.
It did.
Big French connection with and Quebec connection with the Tampa Bay Lightning, starting with their GM and working its way down. So yeah, I mean it was even a shorter offseason than normal because of the COVID situation, and the long playoff run. I think the biggest impact is what it had on Shea Weber's body, because I thought Shea Weber played the best hockey he's played with the Canadiens during the playoffs, and when you find out about all the injuries he was playing through, you wonder how he was able to do it. And you wonder if it was worth it for him, or because he's obviously, it looks like his career might be over. So that long playoff run and the wear and tear it took on him, the wear and tear it took on Carey Price, who needed that knee surgery, and now whatever else issues he's dealing with. He had a hip issue also that didn't need surgery. But yeah, this is and their big four in defense. Joel Edmondson's still missing, undisclosed injury, but you wonder how much of that is from the four Clydesdales during the playoffs who are playing monster minutes every second night all the way through the postseason. So there's no doubt that that's had an impact. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the bigger impact is the players who are in that playoff run who aren't here anymore. I think that's the biggest impact on this team.
And it is a short off season. It's after being there before, and then you get, before the summer goes by, you're back in it. And of course, with all the new players, the expectations maybe were a little bit high, obviously, with success that they did have. And maybe they thought they were a little bit better than what they actually are. And I think they're coming down to earth right now, seeing the way they're playing and how they're playing, which is not going to allow them to win many hockey games. So they have some work to do, and it's time to get at it, because they can't keep this losing streak going.
The other thing that's concerning, and I asked Dominic Ducharme about this the other night after the game, is that he was thrown into the deep end without a life jacket last year when he took over from Claude Julien. He was trying to implement his system on the fly and struggled through the regular season and struggled through the first 4 games against the Leafs in the playoffs. But then once everything seemed to kick in, that system worked wonderfully. I mean, they were all over teams. Teams couldn't do anything with the puck. They played fantastic. And now that you look at them on the ice, they're totally unorganized. Like, the system obviously isn't working. Now, was it a case of the players that left, the new guys not understanding it? David Savard was talking at the pregame skate or the morning skate the other day, talking about how he's still adjusting to the Canadiens' defensive system and trying to figure out where he should be. And Carl Alzner's name popped into my head because I remember him saying the exact same stuff when he came here, and I was like, oh boy, that's not a good sign. So it's there's a lot of things right now to be concerned about with this hockey team.
And let me say that systems, after being there and as a coach, when things are not going well, you knock yourself out looking at the system stuff. But really, the game of hockey, there's no secret recipe. There's a system in place. It comes down to the players and the execution, how bad you want to beat the guy next to you. Your read and reaction is critical. Confidence, all that stuff that they found a way to get going in the playoff stretch later on. But right now they don't have any type of cohesion as a group, and that's very concerning. That the players now would probably question some of the stuff as far as, okay, is this the right thing to do? And the result of that is they're doing more watching than actually doing, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, Rick, that must be something. I was going to ask you that, like, as a former player, what's it like when, I'm sure you've been on teams where guys weren't maybe buying into what the coach was selling. What's that like?
Well, like I said, you can put a lot of emphasis on system stuff. It's not that big a deal. I really believe that the game is about competing. The game is about taking advantage of opportunity when it's there. Work ethic, a lot of things that come into play that make any kind of a system work. It's a matter of each player performing to their best. And if you don't have everybody performing to their best, it doesn't matter what system you're going to have. It ain't going to work. So really tough situation from a coaching staff, because you do a lot of head scratching, go, okay, what do I do here? Maybe I should adjust this because this isn't working for us. And there's sleepless nights that are happening right now, and it's not a fun time, as coaches to see what's happening on the ice. But you have to really, pass the buck to the personnel and say, listen, guys, this is the way we have to play. Now let's do it to your 100%. And I don't see that happening right now.
Yeah, I was watching, I think it was Lanty Sham after the game the other night, and Guy Carbonneau, they were showing a clip of him losing it when he was coaching and saying, Kirk Muller and I can't go on the ice and do it. These guys have to do it. And I guess it's a similar situation right now also.
Yeah, and the Canadiens have 78 more games to figure all of that out. They're 0-4. There are 78 more games, but I think you've probably seen statistics on teams who have started as badly and have not made the playoffs. There was one Arpon Basu put up a couple days ago. I think 15 teams over the last 5 years have started 0-3, and 4 of them made the playoffs, and 2 of them were because of the bubble playoffs. So yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of where they might have been standing. That's gonna do it for this. Oh, are you gonna say something, Stu?
I believe the Habs made the playoffs last time. They were 0-4 also when Mario Tremblay was coach.
Was that 95, 96?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 26 years ago. Yeah, that was a long time ago. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Michael, you filled in very seamlessly with everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in as our special guest this week.
Well, thanks. I'm glad I passed the audition. Quoting the Beatles.
Of course, yes. And of course, thank you as always to Rick and Stu, and to you, everyone watching at home, wherever you may be watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd like to see the subscriber count go up. Subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. You can go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to check that out. And of course, visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out more full episodes about last night from Eric Leon and other really cool stuff about the Montreal Canadiens. Peace.